Then they brought in Susie, who met Lori at that point. Now it was the first time they met, the two mediums. And they decided, okay, let's open the envelope, take out the pictures. So there was he there was the two mediums, there was his partner, Dr. Linda, and there was a psychiatrist that was the one who introduced Lori to him, Dr. Watson or something like that. So they looked at the pictures, just by looking at the pictures, and they all tried to figure out which picture matched what, or matched which person. And like he says, the law of average, he got like 2 right. Nobody got everything right. Linda got, I think, 1 right, 1 got no right, and all that. And then they went to the notes that he had made when Lori was trying to contact these people. So he gave the notes. He read the notes for everybody. This is what Dr. Henry said. This is what Dr. William James said. This is that. Now let's look back at the pictures and figure out which pictures belong to whom. They got 100% right, because now it makes sense, right? So what he says with this picture experiment, and he said the combined probability of getting 5 out of 5 with 4 tries is less than 1 in 1,000. Like the fact of getting them all right with that information. Well, obviously, with information you can get it right, but before, they didn't get it right. Then he went on to do another experiment, this time only with Lori. And the experiment was this. He came up with 12 names. 6 names of people who are deceased, and 6 names of people who are living. Okay? He was the only one who knew the names. So, he wrote the name, only the names, on a card. And you put the card away. And the names, again, the same people come up, right? The 6 people who were deceased, the 6 people who were alive. And his idea of putting the people who were alive was that, you know what? If she's trying to communicate with someone, I'm going to catch her now. Because these people aren't dead, right? So, the idea of the experiment was this. He would pick the card, and he would mentalize that person. If he didn't know the person who had already passed away, like Linda's father, for example, that he never met, he said what he tried to think of was something that would connect that person. Like something he knew, like his love for his daughter, for example. And then, just by doing that, she was supposed to try and pick up the vibes or communicate with the spirits and let him know if that person was male or female, young or old, living or deceased. Okay? So there were 12 names, this card experiment. Okay? So, very well, he starts. And all he would do, he wouldn't say a thing. He would look at the card, he would see a name, Dr. Henry Uzet, for example, he wouldn't say a thing. And this was also, everything he does is recorded, and with his partners there. And he would think, okay, and she would attempt to write down what he was thinking. And again, he was trying to catch her, right? Well, the interesting thing was, she wrote down all the names correctly. So he thought, oh, it could also be telepathy, which is quite probable. It can happen. She's picking up what he was thinking, right? Very probable to happen. But the interesting thing is that she started then receiving messages from these people and saying things right there and then. And she goes, when she picks up, I think it was Linda's dad, said, you know what, there's a person here. He's telling me that he has a connection with you. Yeah, he has a connection with you. Maybe he's your relative or something. And she goes, no, wait a minute. No, he's not connected with you. He's Linda's dad. Well, she knew, right? Again, he was very, the matching card experiment, the single blind, because he was the only one who knew. 12 people, 6 deceased, 6 living. She got them all correct. So he then decides to go further with this, okay? And he started thinking, okay, what's going on here? Yes, he thinks telepathy, for sure. That is a possibility, we're not denying that. And quite likely, the people that were living That's how she picked them up, right? However, when she started giving him messages of the people that were actually communicating through her or were there, or she was picking up some information, this is no longer telepathy then. She's picking up, well, from him and her. She could be picking up from someone else, also the person who's already deceased. He talks about remote viewing, and that's about the possibility of, with the experiment of the drawings. Okay, how could she be finding that information? The remote viewing being that she's able to dislocate herself, and we talked about the fact of in Spiritism, for example, it's like an out-of-body experience, as we often say about desdobramento, and she actually goes there, sees it, comes back, and reports it. Okay, some mediums are quite capable of, we're actually quite capable of doing that when we sleep, for example. So he talks about, is that a possibility? Yes, again, that is a possibility, but the interesting point here was that the information she received that had nothing, that was very personal, of the people who actually she was trying to contact, who had already passed away. So in terms of these possibilities, I looked up in the Spiritist doctrine and I saw this quote that I thought was interesting. Within the context of the universal principle, so you think of where we are immersed in this universal principle in terms of energy and energy fields, a thought form is obviously not constrained to the limits of the cranium or the brain, but rather circulates freely everywhere. It projects itself through inconceivable distances with a speed infinitely superior to the speed of light. It has been demonstrated that the energies displayed by a thought form, so moving objects, exercise influence over plants, animals, living beings, and certainly transmit images, sensations, emotions, and abstract concepts among these. So this would definitely support that possibility. Okay, picking up of thought forms. It's all. I mean, we know it's all energy. We're all immersed in energy. I mean, quantum physics is already talking about that. Even though Spiritism has been talking about it for a long time, that is definitely a possibility. Okay. At this point, things are surfacing. People are hearing about what his doctor is doing. So he gets contacted by a TV station. Somebody from HBO contacts him and said, we want to do an experiment. And, we want to make this kind of a television documentary. And he's kind of iffy at first, and then he said, you know what, let's go for it. Because he also was going to get funding, right? So they organized this huge experiment, which is called the HBO experiment, for the lack of a better word. And basically, at that point then, he gets a few more mediums, because this was then later, in terms of, he gets a few more mediums, and he gets, he needs to find additional mediums with integrity, that's major, to conduct the experiment. This is, again, he's saying, you know what? If it's true, let the data speak. Let's find out, right? So he finds a few more mediums. He tells us the whole process of finding these mediums. I'm not going to go into that right now. And this is how the experiment was going to work. The person, the journalist, the TV crew, the person in charge of conducting the experiment of the actual filming and putting the documentary together says, okay, I'm going to bring in a sitter. Now, the sitter is the person who actually sits. So if you are the medium and I'm the sitter, you're going to get information about people related to me or that I know. Okay, so that's the sitter. So the person that was directing the document says, I'm going to bring my own sitter because I don't want the possibility of people finding out the information about this person. No one is going to know who the sitter is until the actual moment. And he said, fair enough. That's what he liked. And he said, you know what? Great. I'm going to do the same. He said, because it's a TV documentary. So this sitter could easily say, it's all baloney, even though it may not be. Right? So he said, okay, I'll do that as long as you let me bring my own sitter that no one knows who it is. And they agreed on that. So the next they had to do is they decided on a profile for the sitter, and this was the profile they had, the sitter they had to find, okay? Someone who had experienced at least 6 deaths of closely related people within the last 10 years. So that was what they decided that the sitter had to have. So, and could only be known with the experiments. No one else could know. So it was deep, big secret. The problem is he couldn't find anybody. He's trying to find, 6 deaths in 10 years, supposedly it's a lot, right? And it's kind of funny what happens. He said eventually, it was like just a few days before the experiment, he still didn't have his sitter. He didn't know about the TV people, but he didn't have his. So he's shopping for a new dryer or some, I think it's Sears. And he said, this woman, the saleswoman, starts talking to him. And, like he said, like the psychologist that I am, I'm listening to this person, giving her my full attention. Before I know, she's disclosing all this information about everything that has happened in her life and all the people who passed in her family in the last few years. And he said, and I went counting. Discreetly. Sure enough. He said, she met the criteria. So next challenge is to convince this woman to be part of the experiment. So anyway, to make a long story short, he does convince the woman. At this point, no one knows this woman except him, and he hardly knows her. She was a sales assistant in the store where he bought his dryer, his washing machine, whatever. So, and then they go on to do the experiment. Okay. They decide to, the HBO pays for a place for them to meet. Camera crews everywhere, live recording, everything there. Okay. And this was another quote that he put in his book that I thought was quite interesting. One must choose truth rather than peace of mind. He's thinking, at this point in time, I'm a doctor, a scientist, a PhD from Harvard, professor from Yale, have my reputation to look after. Things are coming out in the open. Right? TV, all of a sudden. And when he runs into this, I start thinking, you know what, is what I need to do. This is the right thing to do. I can't live with this in my head, knowing that this is a truth, is a possibility. Actually made me think today when I was listening to your presentation about, you mentioned about Pope somewhere in the Middle Ages or a little bit after, who decided that he was going to come up with it. He knew it was going to be the end of him, but he knew his conscience wouldn't let him be otherwise. Same idea here, right? So they went on. So there were 2 sitters, 5 mediums. Okay. One of them being Laurie Campbell. The other lady, Susie Smith, at this point in time is quite old. I think she might have even have already passed away at this point. I can't remember. But there were 2 sitters and 5 mediums. There were another 4 mediums besides Laurie. And this is how they started out. Both sitter and medium were hooked to an electrode cap for the electroencephalogram and to arm electrodes for an electrocardiogram to monitor heartbeat to brainwave effects. A 2-minute resting baseline was provided each time. The whole idea behind this, and he was the one controlling the computers for this, is he wanted to see if there was communication mind to mind. It was telepathy, right? Was this because he could see through all the data that he was receiving through his computer, if there was brain wave between the two, or is it something that was coming from somewhere else? Okay, so it was all recorded that way. The sitter would sit in a chair behind a large white opaque cloth screen. So you got to think, I have the sitter here. There's a big screen, okay, opaque, so you can't see through. The medium is in the back. The medium has no idea who that person is, and is going to then try and find information about maybe some of the disease related to that person.
So they couldn't see each other?
No, they couldn't see each other and they could not talk.